It is 4 o'clock, and I'm going to turn it over to Jason and Vaughn with Benchmark, and I'll let them get started. We are recording the meeting, and we are broadcasting live on YouTube for those who do want to view it later. So as people join in, I will let them pop in. So if you hear somebody, I'm going to try to keep everybody muted for a few minutes. If you need to unmute, you should have a way to do that on your device or your computer. But if you're really frantic and you just need to start waving at somebody, feel free to do so.
All right, you ready for me?
Hang on 1 second.
Hey, Pam.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How you doing, lady?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Hi, Pam. Good to see you.
All right, everybody should be muted. If you need to unmute yourself, let me know, and we'll go from there. Oops, sorry, Jason Vaughn. Go ahead.
No problem. All right. Thank you all for coming this afternoon to our first online Jamestown Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. We would have loved to have met with you in person today. Unfortunately, that is not possible, at least for the time being. And thanks to Matthew for getting this all set up. I've also got Jason Epley here with me. I'm Vaughn Hanson. For those that might not remember, we've got Jason Epley here. And hello. Bridget Calais is back behind me. You can't see her. We're all staying 6 feet apart here, Benchmark HQ. We've also got Monica Gale on the conference call with us. She's down in Austin right now, but joining us from afar since she's been helping us work on the plan. The agenda for today's meeting, which Matthew, I believe, forwarded to everyone prior, is this. We're going to say hi, then talk for just a couple minutes about the PUD amendment. We'll talk some about the listening sessions that we did back in February, give you a little update on the community survey, talk about our thoughts about community engagement in the near term, and talk about some of our future steering committee meetings and how we'll accomplish that. And Matthew, please feel free to jump in at any time as we go through this. If anybody's got a question, I believe there is a hand raise button. If you click on the participants and then it brings up a little list, there's a thing that says raise hand. And then either Matthew and or I might see that if you have a question, but we will pause from time to time to see if anybody has any comments or wants to bring anything up. And I guess we'll probably go into a time we can chat as a group here in a little bit. So Matthew asked that we begin the meeting just because this is kind of a pertinent subject at the moment about the PUD amendment. It's something that's going on in the community and will likely come up as a matter of or topic of discussion as we're moving through the comprehensive plan process. As you likely all know, the town council has before them a proposed amendment to the town's land development ordinance that would provide for planned new developments as a new, basically as a district, that would be a new regulatory tool that would essentially afford the town a greater degree of control and more flexibility as well for potential developers that are looking to do larger scale projects in the community. Of course, tangential to this, a development group has put forth some concepts to the community about a proposed development on Johnson Farm that would most likely take advantage of this if it is enacted into the town's land development ordinance, and has presented that to the community. In response to all these goings on, the town asked that we, Benchmark, conduct a survey to get the community's thoughts and concerns and ideas, both on the PUD as a regulatory tool, as a general regulatory tool, as well as the developer's initial concept for the development. And we have concluded that survey with what, Bridget, how many, 204 online participants in that survey. We'll share the results at an upcoming council meeting. But what I can tell you, lots of people had very thoughtful input into the questions that we asked. It wasn't a long survey, but people did definitely give their opinions. And there was probably a little bit of confusion still about maybe what kind of, what the PUD, what the purpose of this as a regulatory tool is. And I think we'll try and address that with the council in their meeting a little bit more when we come make a presentation to them, or online most likely. How this integrates with our process really is that it's going to be a topic of discussion in the community as we are moving through the comprehensive planning process. And, time isn't necessarily going to stand still on anything. We have, parallel tracks really going on right now. It's not the town's decision as to when somebody comes to propose something. And it's not something that we, don't deal with from time to time. When we work in communities, they're usually growing communities. That's why they're making plans. And so there's often development pressure, ongoing development proposals on the table as we work on these projects. And so we will, certainly ensure that we integrate that as a topic of our ongoing discussions about developing the comprehensive plan. And it's come up in the community survey as well. But it won't be the singular focus. Of course, we have to plan for the entire community and make that a component of this. That's a very large property in your community. And so we will certainly plan for it like we will plan for everything else, but recognizing there is some immediacy to it, and it might, we don't know what the process is going to be from this point forward, depending on the council's action, depending on the developer, but it will likely remain a topic of of concern and community interest as we move through the comprehensive planning process. Matthew, is there anything specific that you'd like for me to go over that we've talked about in our conversations?
I'm good right now. I can unmute everybody and let them log in, or let them come in and say what they need to say. I will say that we've had a couple people join us. Ed Stafford's now with us, and I believe Sherry is on the phone. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and if I've messed up, let me know.
All right. So any comments, questions, thoughts on that current topic?
Well, I guess just from the, this is Martha Wolf, if I may ask a question. I've just noticed on a lot of the comments we've had on plan unit development and the Johnson property, as there have been discussed together, although, we've got two separate things, but just wanting to know in the plan unit development amendment, what many people have asked me is about building materials, design, density, aesthetics, quality, level of control. And are these things that the plan unit amendment can address?
So I guess that was a question, Martha, is that correct? Are those,
And address those issues.
Sure. I mean, just like any other type of, there's two different basic kinds of zoning districts out there. There are base districts, which are essentially spelled out in your ordinance, and then the general regulations of your ordinance apply to those base districts. And there's uses that are permitted by right, and there's uses that might be permitted with specified conditions or with a conditional or special use permit. And then there's conditional zoning. And plan unit development is generally a typical type of conditional zoning, where it's basically an empty set, or it can be an empty set, or you can rely on your existing districts, but essentially you would have the ability to, the developer would have the ability to propose certain additional conditions beyond what the ordinance would specify. And staff, the planning board, the town council, and citizens could request other additional conditions that they saw necessary, and the advisory board and the decision-making board can request the developer apply those to their property or not. And if they feel that they have maybe met the intent and the desires of the community and the desires of the planning board and the desires of the council, then they can choose to approve that conditional zoning district plan unit development, essentially, or choose not to, since it's a legislative decision. There's a little bit more nuance from a legal perspective than that, but as other legislative decisions go, you're more free to negotiate with this process. And you do have some longer term control that you can exercise, as well as control through the actual development of the concept plans, than you would have if it was zoned one of your base zoning districts. It might just be, well, you can have 2 units per acre, 4 units per acre, what have you. And then absent any other kind of requirement in your ordinance, there would be no real way to impose something more than your ordinance already says. The other so when you propose conditions on a conditional zoning district map amendment, essentially like a plan unit development, one requirement, of course, is that the community and the developer agree, the owner agree to those conditions in writing. And any condition that's not agreed to by both parties can't be enforced. But that would also, most things are approved subject to the agreement that these conditions be met. So that gives you a little bit more control.
Right, right.
Anything else on that?
Well, I guess this is, again, just curious about your experience maybe with other municipalities, how they have handled planned unit development amendments. So how has that worked for other municipalities that you've had experience with?
Yeah, just like anything, you see a range of outcomes depending on the thought process of the decision-making boards. And generally, you'll have some sort of a degree, at least, better quality. Some of it, the developer matters to a certain extent, what the community asks for, what the community requires. And so you can have a range of outcomes. And so ensuring that the contents of the points of negotiation or the required items of negotiation or condition in the plan unit development are adequate to meet your needs is the most necessary thing. Some communities have plan unit development ordinances that leave things fairly open-ended. They tend to maybe not have as much control or not as good outcomes as communities that spell out more of what they are looking for on the front end. Ones that do it as a type of development by right without any kind of legislative oversight. So it's not, sometimes plan unit developments are done as just a type of development that might be permitted by right in a particular zoning district. You don't have to apply for conditional zoning map amendment. Having that conditional zoning map amendment as part of a plan unit development is also important. You have better outcomes with that as well. And then it's about follow through, ensuring that the community holds the developer to what they said they want to do, at least in terms of quality. Plans can change over time. The markets certainly change, and we dealt with the fallout of a lot of that back in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, as we were adjusting to changing conditions in the market. And a lot of plans came back to communities at that time for revision. But in terms of holding, so exactly what you're getting might change a little bit, but holding the developer to the infrastructure that you need, the community amenities that are needed to make sure that you have adequate open space and recreational facilities and greenway trails and water and sewer and parks and things of that nature. Sticking to those guns is very important, and making sure that the development is of a quality. You have spelled out a set of design guidelines. If that's what your community desires, and stick to that, then you'll have a better outcome than letting them change things down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like Jane has a question.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Oh, you're muted again.
Oops, sorry. The PUD ordinance that the planning board passed in November, is that strong enough to do what is necessary to control this in particular developer and all the things he wants to do? I mean, that's probably a very loving, because that's what people are asking.
Sure.
Vaughn, you want me to do this?
Yeah, you have more knowledge.
Yeah, so the proposal that's out there right now that the planning board has looked at essentially says, it gives you guidelines on the number, the size of the property that it would apply to. Currently, it's 50 acres or greater, if I remember correctly. It's been a few months. It's
I
been
think it's
since,
10 acres.
it was 10 acres or
is.
larger, 10 acres?
10.
Sorry, there was some discussion amongst council at one point about maybe upping that to 50 acres.
Correct.
There has been a lot of a time between the time that planning board last saw this. I believe it was October, if I'm not mistaken, or November. So it's been some time, and a lot of things have happened between now and then. So forgive me for not having all of it in front of me at this moment. But essentially what this does is outlines a framework, a set of guidelines that they have to participate in the plan unit development. They would have to outline everything they want to do, all of their setbacks, all of their landscaping, the types of development they want to do. They have to bring everything to us. So I would say it's fairly restrictive at this point. They can't do anything without eventually the planning board and the council having ultimate control, but hearing their request officially. The plans went out there in February. They have been modified, and they're just concept plans at this point. What planning board and council will get when that request does come in, provided they're allowed to use the plan unit development tool, will be a significant packet of information that will outline exactly how the development's going to look, where it's going to be, how it behaves, from aesthetic standpoint, setbacks, anything that you can think of. If you look at this proposed development under the PUD restriction as a planning board, you'll be able to give a lot of feedback. And I've had conversations with a bunch of different people around the community, and we think that that will be the best tool from a regulation standpoint to get the things that people want. We have heard a lot of feedback from people who live in town and out of town that want certain things, and the way to do that is to use this tool. As Vaughn said, it's a type of conditional zoning. We can request different conditions. It's somewhat of a negotiation back and forth. I mean, ultimately, the developer would have to agree to those. I mean, you can't say, for example, I want you to mint gold bars for every citizen of Jamestown, and them, they probably wouldn't agree to that. So I'm trying to use something that's a little bit out there, but you can ask for those types of things. They don't have to agree to them. Ultimately, it's the council who has the final say in whether or not it's approved. So, they're going to be very interested in trying to appease both planning board and council, and to some extent the public, to make sure that they are bringing forth a package that the council could, in good faith, approve. So they've got a lot invested in it, and they're going to try to do what they can to get their project approved. It is up to the planning board and council and staff to make sure that we don't miss anything, and that we are trying to reach a compromise that works for everyone.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Well, I've looked at PUDs in other places, and of course, they're all different from Jamestown, but I've looked at Archdale, and they have a very different one. It's just leveled differently. And I guess I have a question about why does this have to be that many acres? If another town limits it to 200 acres, let's say, and then the developer has to survey out that 200 and then request for the next 200. And at that point, the town can see what they're doing with the first section. before they go to another section. Just, I guess, is more control when there are fewer acres surveyed out. That was just a thought of mine. I don't know if that makes sense because that's not my specialty. I'm just trying to read up on it as much as I can. But it seems like a huge amount for one developer in one respect too. Huge amount of acres.
Yeah,
So, because of the concern about it looking so much alike. And again, maybe that'll go to the guidelines, you know, that it not look so much alike, that it have different, the buildings would look different in one section from another section, for example.
yeah, that's a good point. You know, that's a good example of what a concept plan that goes to, you know, ultimately the development plans might spell out is how each area of the plan unit development might differ from each other in terms of lot sizes and housing types, materials, setbacks, what have you, to provide some variation in the community. And generally, better developers will want and need to have some variation anyway because of the stratification of the housing market. You can't necessarily sell all of one type of house over a project that large. If we were dealing with 20 or 30 acres, sure, you'd probably get very similar, but over a larger property, you're most likely going to get a variation anyway, especially in this part of the country. If we were in Arizona or California somewhere, maybe not. But here, I think we would, just because of the income variation.
Is there a chance with it being so big that so many acres that there's more potential for a developer going bankrupt and somebody else having to pick it up? Is that a valid reason to break it up into a smaller
That's
200s rather than 400?
Yeah, and so
That's a good question.
that's a great question, and I don't think it's variables go into that. We saw lots of housing developers go out of business
Yeah.
10, 12 years ago, and a lot of developments sit around for a while. A larger developer with there could be better capitalized. I think we're, you know, somewhat in this particular case, the matter at hand, I think the town is somewhat, and the developer is somewhat beholden to the size of the property for sale. It may not be the case that the current owner or the owner of any property that size would want to sell half of it and then wait around for the other half to be sold in 20 years potentially.
That's a valid point. That's a good point.
But I mean, both, you know, all of these things are, you know, considerations
Sure.
that will come into play. I think having a diversified set of development types within a large property like that will make it less likely that there would be financial trouble because you could move into a phase where you were doing something that market was demanding more at that particular time and hold off your other neighborhoods or sections of the development until those came back or gave you time to plan with the town to change them to respond better to the market. I could just, you know, I could go buy 5 acres and just as easily lose my shirt in the next couple years probably as if I had 200 or 400 acres. So trying to predict the future, you know, it's tough. And we hope that whoever, you know, all the developers that once they begin a project, we really hope that they are able to finish it out, because dealing with zombie subdivisions is not fun.
No, sir. No, sir. Good points.
And while we were talking, I just kind of looked up Archdale's plan unit development restrictions. I don't see anything in here that says that you have to limit it to a certain size, this parcel. They do have minimum size requirements, just as we have
Right,
talked about,
right.
but there's nothing in here that says that they have to split it up into a certain number of tracks. I know it's a lot easier for people to kind of wrap their head around smaller development a little at a time. But as Vaughn said, that's not how this piece of property was marketed. We don't dictate, you know, what the seller wants to sell. And we certainly, we can talk to the developer about phasing. And I don't think that anybody is going to build all of this in, you know, 1 year. I just want to be clear that this will take some time to develop. I think they've even said it's, you know, in the 5 to 10 year range. So I just want to be clear that, you know, it's not up to us to really to say you can only develop a little at a time until we see that we're okay with what you're doing. That doesn't really meet the intent of the law. The idea would be that we would come up with a comprehensive look at the property, which is why they want to use the plan unit development tool. It's a comprehensive development tool for the entire property so that it develops in a cohesive fashion rather than in a piecemeal way. If they wanted to do it in a very piecemeal way, you know, it would be a lot more expensive for the town. I want to be clear about that. It would be a lot more time consuming, which may appeal to some people, but I don't think that that is what you're not going to end up with the best product at the end. And I feel like it's our responsibility as staff members to try to hold people to getting the best product in the end. It won't make everybody happy, I promise you. I have no reservations about that. I mean, I know that that's not going to make everybody happy, but we're going to do the best we can to make sure that we protect Jamestown's interests. Okay. Anybody else?
Right.
Yeah.
Ready?
And just one more thing, and sort of switching over to the Plan Unit Development Amendment as it is proposed, that is written, which is preliminary. It does speak a lot about preserving environmental factors, but I wondered if it's possible to, within those parameters, put more precise things about trees and what can be cut, what cannot be cut, more selective tree cutting than a clear cutting. Is that
Great idea.
put within the parameters, or is just that something that has to be negotiated within the plan whenever?
My personal feeling is that that's something that would be case specific based on the property that's being developed. So there's been a lot of misinformation being spread by some groups on Facebook. There's been a lot of misunderstanding in the community, and we've tried very, very, very hard to help people understand. And by the results of the survey, they probably have missed that still. I don't know if they just don't trust us or if they don't want to understand. I mean, we've tried to, you know, as much as I possibly can to help people understand this, that the text amendment is just setting up that conditional use district, that plan unit development district. And the ultimate Johnson's property development proposal, which we haven't received, would be a lot more specific. You know, we keep having people say, well, show us the plans first and then we'll approve it. And I'm like, number one, town council approves that. Number two, we can't expect a developer to spend the type of time and money that would be required to come up with very case specific plans if we don't even have a tool that's in our toolkit to allow them to use it. So I think that's unfair to ask anybody to do that. You know, I wouldn't ask somebody who wants to build a single family house to go ahead and show me all of their plans if we don't even have a single family zoning district that I can allow them to build the house on.
Mhm.
So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think that with the environmental concerns that you might have, it would be definitely a case by case topic that we should address with whomever comes in.
Whichever parcel is being presented, because they would be different.
Because we have a lot of parcels that will be down, you know, in floodplains or along the river, or, you know, in those types of environmentally sensitive areas that will need us to have a little bit more control over. there is already a tremendous amount of control from the state and the federal government that's passed down to us. And I know Martha's aware of that, but we do have a lot of things that are already out there for us that they have to follow, that we have to make them follow. And I know this developer has already indicated that they're going to preserve a tremendous amount of property. I think it was like close to 150 acres of environmentally sensitive land. And it is an area that is not already eligible for development, if you will. I mean, because of those rules and regulations that we told you about. But they've indicated that they're willing to preserve another big section of open space for parklands and some other things. So I think that they are, initially at least trying to address some of the environmental concerns. But getting down into a tree ID, like we're not going to cut this tree, but they're going to cut that tree,
Right.
is almost impossible from our standpoint. We don't have the ability to go out there and regulate which tree they're cutting. Now, if they have a specimen tree or two that they want to preserve, we can work with them on how to do that. There's certain ways to do that. And we can certainly talk to them about what types of landscape regulations they want to come back with trees. I will say that there's been a lot of bad information being spread amongst the Jamestown United Facebook group about the fact that Jamesford Meadows was not, the trees were not cut there, and that the developers went around and didn't grade anything and were able to build houses around the trees. And that is completely false. I have aerial photos that show
Yeah.
that area was a Boy Scout camp. There were a lot of pasture lands that were there, and it's been over 30 years since that was developed. And quite frankly, trees grow back within 30 years, especially if they're planted. I'm not saying that they went in there and just tabletop clear cut the land. I don't think that was the case. I think that they were fairly good about they did the same thing. They went to the environmental sensitive areas. There are some draws or some drainage features that run through there that they probably were not allowed to develop at the time, and they preserve those. I just want to make sure that the information that's being spread by some of the people around our community is false, and people will not. They're latching onto that as gospel truth, and it's not. I know that the developer that is interested in the Johnson Farm has indicated that they are going to go above and beyond what is required. It's our responsibility to hold them to that. So when we do receive a request, I think we need to make sure that we hold them to those requests.
Thank you.
I have received a request through the chat box here that says, can I speak to any knowledge of the health of Diamondback and the potential, if any, of the impact of the COVID on their plans or financial health? No, I don't know their finances. I don't work for them. So I can't tell you exactly what their financial health is. I think that everybody in the world is interested in how this virus is going to affect the economy. I think we've seen a little bit of difference, and I'm not an economist, but I think that there's a big difference between what we saw in the 2008 to 2010 timeframe with the housing issues that we don't see right now. I think our economy was clicking along fairly well up until the point that this became an issue. And I think that once we can get to a point where everybody feels safe and that everybody is safe, or that there's been a way to flatten the curve, that we can see the economy rebound fairly quickly. So I couldn't speak to them specifically as a company, but I'm very hopeful that we will come out of this very, very quickly once the gate is lifted, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Well, we've got a standing appointment with Benchmark to do an actual presentation to council. They're going to present the survey results. They're going to do a more formal presentation on what PUDs are and what they aren't. And I would anticipate that if If everything is good, we will have a face-to-face meeting with the council in May. If we are still in this type of environment, it may be another virtual meeting like we're going to do tomorrow night with council. But if that is the case, we will try to get information out about that prior. I know Benchmark is prepared to do their presentation from through Zoom or through virtual means if they need to. Well, I'll turn it back over to you, Vaughn.
All right. So the next item on the agenda, back on February 11th and 12th, it seems like a lifetime ago now, we did 2 days of listening sessions. Had, I think, a dozen different groups of people over that 2-day period. Met lots of interesting folks that had a lot of different perspectives and backgrounds from their time in and around Jamestown. And their businesses here, and they're raising families here, and their involvement with the town over the years in various capacities. And so this was our kind of, besides our first meeting with you, this was our first real chance to reach out and start to get to know the community on a more personal basis, hearing people's stories and their concerns and ideas about the future. And we just thought we would present a brief summary of what we heard. We're planning on doing this back in March when everything was completely fresh on our minds. But here we are. So I think really the unifying thing that we heard from every participant in those dozen meetings was they really love Jamestown. They appreciate, that they've been able to be involved with a community like Jamestown, and they come at it from a lot of different perspectives, whether it's, fond memories of, growing up here, starting a successful business here, getting involved with community organizations or church, having their kids go to school in Jamestown. But to a person that we talked to, they really enjoyed their lives there, or having the ability to have a business in the town and interacting with the community in that way. One of the things that people cited pretty frequently as to why is, they felt that the town had this kind of small town charm to, for lack of a better term, that Matthew, I don't know if you heard that. So
Yeah, I did. We
Paul,
may have,
so that
we may have exceeded our allotment, but it is being recorded and saved to use. So don't worry.
Okay, so you're recording. All right. So the small town charm, and people had, different ideas of what embodied that the most. And we've been exploring that a little bit more in the broader community survey that we put out. That was definitely a theme. As we have seen with some of the discussions about the Planned Unit Development District, managing growth was a point of emphasis, particularly from a standpoint of ensuring quality growth, not so much quantity. The quantity has something to do with it, but the quality, to me at least, in the discussions we had, seemed to be a more overriding concern. Let's see. So physical and social links is kind of an abstract idea there, but one of the concerns that we heard and opportunities really that we heard from people that participated in the listening sessions was the need to better bridge the divide, the physical divide that the railroad causes in the community. People that lived on one side of the railroad tracks talk about not going or knowing people even from the other side of the railroad tracks. Not a huge economic difference necessarily in who lives on each side, but there is a kind of a cultural or social distance between the two. And so figuring out ways to both link the people and the places in Jamestown better together so that more people felt like they were involved through the entire community. I believe one of our participants said that maybe she had lived in Jamestown for a number of years and had only recently driven out towards Oakdale Cotton Mill. And so kind of anecdotes like that show that the psychological barriers that are posed there. And, you know, if you're on one side of the railroad tracks, you're very easily funneled along one route of transportation. If you're on another, you're funneled easily into another route of transportation. And so finding ways to both link, you know, people physically and socially throughout the community, and using that as an example will be something that we'll be exploring more. Kind of along with what I talked about with managing growth, the somewhat unique aesthetics that especially places like downtown Jamestown, and kind of going back to some of the historic architecture in the community, the landscaping, the trees, the aesthetic appeal of the community was a major point of emphasis, and went back into the whole small town charm and the loving Jamestown themes that emerged. But, you know, making sure that things not only functioned well or were constructed solidly, but when they, you know, when they were done, that they fit in from an aesthetic perspective with the community as a whole. Downtown and its emergence really as a hub of dining opportunities, entertainment opportunities, small businesses that served really a regional audience now. What we've learned, people coming from all over the Triad to take part in the dining opportunities that are there, some of the evening activities that are there, with a couple places have live music and offer some adult beverages in the evening. That people's memories of downtown Jamestown from the old, you know, from growing up around there, but also citing some challenges with things like parking, for instance, and pedestrian bicycle infrastructure coming through downtown, people speeding to the area. I spent some time talking with a couple of your supervising sheriff's deputies about some of those issues as well. Those concerns came out. The character of the community, I think there's some concern about what growth will do to the community's character at large. And so concerns about changing the underlying aspects of the community that make it an attractive place for people to live, and making sure that as growth occurs, that the nature and quality, again, these things are all interlinked, but they don't alter that character, that community character that people hold so dear to themselves. We asked a lot of questions about the bypass because you know, construction still going on right now, and the changes that we were really getting at, what kind of changes people anticipated as that, you know, comes online in the relatively near future. And the sense that I got from our discussions was that there's more, it's somewhat of a sense of the unknown. We don't really know what's going to happen, but also a sense of opportunity with regard to Main Street coming through town, as it would potentially, we think from models and just our experience with similar roads and how they've acted elsewhere, that it would relieve some of the cut through traffic, you know, pass through traffic, people going between High Point and Greensboro that comes through town now. And that pass through traffic would then go to the bypass, making it possible potentially for there to be some changes on the transportation network downtown, especially to make it more conducive to bicycle and pedestrian activity, increase safety for drivers as well through the community, reduce speeding and things of that nature. It also is going to open up some development opportunities that might not really exist right now. And that was a concern going along with changing character and making sure that growth is managed. But I think the people that we talked to felt it was more of an opportunity than a concern, really. Community is more of a, you know, came up as a sense of community, the way that the people welcome each other into town when new residents move in. We heard a lot of good stories about people's first days, weeks, and months living in Jamestown and the welcomes that they got. Also, the, you know, the activities that are done as a community. Some of like the summer, spring, summer, fall concerts that are done, and people getting together and enjoying time with their families and their friends at the park. Being a part of a community that has local schools that everybody goes to, being part of a community that has local churches that everybody goes to. And so those were, really important aspects of it. And there was really a desire for there to be more events and opportunities for the community to get together and participate with each other in activities that for families, especially in town. And then the last point that really came out with walkable. The people that lived in town that we talked to, just about all of them mentioned that they really enjoy, they love living in Jamestown because it affords them the opportunity to be able to walk to visit friends, to go out to eat, to walk to the grocery store from a lot of different parts of town. And they might not do that all the time. And if they might, make a quick trip, they'll drive a car. But the ability to do so, the sidewalks that exist along the major transportation routes, and the connections that those provide were really shown to be important in our discussions with people. And people want more, the ability to do that more. And, the new pedestrian bridge is being built by East Fork Road, is, I think, an important component of that, and shows the town's been having a commitment to that. And people, I think, they've seen that piece done or almost done and want to know when the next piece is going to be coming online. And so, the town's done some, work on pedestrian facilities and trails, planning for them. So we'll want to make sure that we integrate all that and help prioritize things further as part of this plan. So that's an overview of what we heard over a couple of days, about 12 hours plus of talking with some of our new friends there in Jamestown. So if anybody's got any questions about what we heard, we'd be happy to go over that now.
Anyone?
Well, I think you covered this very well. And I guess my corner that I'm interested in are all of these, but also maybe with the landscaping, making some sense of continuity or a little more of identity, maybe with the tree canopy. I know that Greensboro is doing some things with planting trees, and High Point just introduced trash for trees or trees for trash. I forgot the way it's phrased. So I know that Jamestown has an opportunity to purchase a tree with a plaque. So that's my interest, and I hope that would be thought of too, is how we make some sense of continuity through, and that might help with the physical and social links too, that it wouldn't be that expensive, that we could look alike at some points. Yeah. Around. So that's about it, but sounds good to me.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the feedback from the listening sessions?
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
I think it was great. Everybody was very open when we talked to them. They're, we tried to make sure that we asked questions that would evoke the kinds of, get people to tell us more about things, because we don't, we go in not really knowing everything. And so we try and get people we ask some pretty broad questions to try and evoke some responses that people might not have thought about, issues to bring up to us. And people, we had the opportunity to talk with people that were involved in range of real estate, involved in the garden clubs, involved in the planning board, current and former councilmen, people that own small businesses downtown, people that are in the engineering business, people that in law enforcement, public safety, fire, developers, big time developers in terms of
Historic preservation people too.
Historic preservation. We heard lots about historic preservation. We heard some of the best stories were from the historic preservation people, of course, because
I'll bet.
know everything about what has occurred in the past. And so it was very enlightening. And both of the people that were more on the historic preservation side that we talked to had, very interesting stories to tell about Jamestown. It really brought out how unique of a community that Jamestown is, especially in the Triad region as a whole. You're one of the few real small towns in the region that has existed for some long period of time, continuously and substantially the same physical form and occupying the same kind of geographic area. A lot of the other towns that are of your size in the Triad don't have that same kind of historic identity. They're more creatures of modern desires to not be annexed by a neighbor or for some other reason. But Jamestown was a town before it was cool to be a town.
Yeah.
The question,
Sure.
were there any comments about the tax structure in Jamestown, how they were drawn to the fact that our taxes were less than the surrounding cities? And any concerns about how we would maintain our low taxes without additional tax revenue?
I don't recall that being brought up.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if that's because of who we talked to or
Yeah.
what, but the taxes weren't necessarily on the top of anybody's mind.
Okay, Yeah.
We did talk about town services,
all right.
but not not from the perspective of necessarily what it costs to provide them.
Gotcha, okay.
We would
Thank
like to see this, or we'd like to see that.
Sure, thank you.
I think, Martha, didn't we talk briefly about taxes and some of the services that, for example, that Cedarwood has, and yet we don't pay taxes in the ETJ areas, which is, I guess that can't be changed, but it is a concern. I think we briefly talked about that we still have some of the services, but we don't pay any of the taxes.
Yeah.
I just wanted to express that you and I had mentioned that at one of the meetings briefly.
Yeah, I do recall that coming up. And that was a point that, the people in the greater Jamestown community that might not live inside the town limits do, of course, benefit from their proximity to the town. Some of the things that they're able to take advantage of that the town does provide. And, there's definitely, that exists everywhere. There's people inside town, there's people outside of town. And, that's one of not the challenges, but that's one of the realities that Jamestown, just like any other town, has to face, is that, it is a service provider, not for everything, but for a lot of things, for a community much larger than its corporate limits. And usually, what benefits one usually benefits all. But it's a burden the town does have to deal with, and it's probably not a huge burden, but it's a benefit to the entire community as well, because it is one community. Some people are inside of town, some people are outside of town, but they interact very frequently with each other.
So Vaughn, is Martha again. I guess you felt like you had a good diversity of people, of backgrounds, of professions, but did you feel like you had a pretty good outcome as far as your numbers of people that came? Good participation?
Yeah, I think that pretty much everybody and Matthew might be able to give some more perspective on this about the number of invitees versus how many people showed. But we had a dozen sessions with people in them over that 2-day period, and we could have done more. We had the ability to do more, but I think we also benefited from all of us that were there from Benchmark those 2 days, being able to hear most of the same things.
I would say we sent out quite a few invitations. There were some last minute people that had last minute conflicts that popped up that they couldn't necessarily make a lot of time that they had chosen. There were a couple of sort of key stakeholder in the business community that weren't able to come that I really wish could have, but I think that we'll pick them back up when Hillary does her in-depth discussion with the business community.
Uh-huh.
So we were really hoping for a couple of those sort of key stakeholders to come in, but they weren't able to for whatever reason. Trying to think, I don't know off the top of my head how many exactly that we invited, but there was a large number. We had a lot of churches that participated too, so that was good. We had a good cross section of town, so I felt good about that.
Yeah.
It was a very diverse group. People came from very different backgrounds, perspectives, old residents, somewhat more recent residents, people that have been involved in the community in some way, but didn't necessarily live here, whether they owned a business in town or provided a service to the town. And so, we really heard a lot of good and different perspectives on things, but really these items up on the screen right now are the kind of unifying elements that we heard from most people in one way, shape, or form.
And how much has this changed with that development of Johnson property? I mean, obviously, when we met, excuse me, last time, that was not on our radar even. We were still talking bypass and Jamestown. And I mean, that certainly guided us down a different path. And then coronavirus come along. I mean, it's been a 60-day period of ups and downs and ins and outs.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Rich. I think that the things that you're seeing that are on those bubbles on the screen are things that really haven't changed in the 14 years that I've been around Jamestown. And Martha can speak to a lot longer than that, and Ed and some of the folks that have been around here a lot longer than most of us. But 12 years, is that what you said, Ed? Did you say 112 years? I didn't hear that.
Martha did 12, I did 100.
But I think that those are all concerns that we at least heard during the last comprehensive plan process. I would say that, and this is a conversation I had with Martha earlier, is that when we did the comprehensive planning process in 2007-8, we were on the cusp of a economic issue that was going on. And heaven forbid, we're doing it again. And I feel like we're in the midst of another economic issue. I think this one's a little bit different. As I said before, my hope is, and I'm trying to be very optimistic, is that we'll pull ourselves up out of this very quickly. I know that there are still a lot of concerns as it relates to downtowns, especially because that's where a lot of our small businesses are housed right now. But I would say that the Johnson property proposal has sort of focused a spotlight on small town charm and managing growth, and maybe a little bit on changing character. But those three things kind of go hand in hand with any development, especially one that's fairly large.
Are there other properties other than the Johnson property that are on the radar for that kind of development and that kind of change?
Yes, we do. We have had conversations about some other properties, but it's very premature right now, so can't really discuss those. But there are other properties out there that I know that, especially if the economy gets back into a holding pattern in a similar capacity that it was before. I think that there would be people that will pull the trigger on those potential developments as well.
Well, you would think with the bypass.
So this is our.
I was just going to say, you would think with the bypass project there, the Harvey Road area is what I would see as being, depending on the exit.
Yeah.
But that would be a place I could see for potential growth.
It's a very good point. Yes.
Well, I mean, I didn't see the Johnson property coming. I mean, obviously, all of us driven by it 100 times and got to a point to where you could say at one point this is going to be something. Well, here it is. But there's a lot of that around town. The more I drive around, the more I see. I'm like, oh my, oh, okay, over there.
Oh, yeah.
This
That's
ain't the
good
first.
point. Go ahead, Rich.
Do we
I didn't
have-
mean to cut you off.
Do we have about 500 more acres in ETJ? Is that a good estimate, guesstimate?
It's going to be somewhere around that. I think, I tried to identify, the parcels that were 10 acres or larger. And when I was doing some research on the PUD stuff, and it's a mix between inside and ETJ. So it's somewhere around 1,200 acres or thereabouts, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, that we identified that were 10 acres or larger. And that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't put together, pieces of land. You may have 5 acres here, 5 acres there, 5 acres, and then they can say, well, I'm going to put together these 5, 6 pieces of property and come up with 30 acres to develop. I think that the bypass will bring us a lot of development pressure. Certainly Corey's not done, doing what they're going to do out there near Publix. They're just getting started. Some of that's in our jurisdiction, and some of that is in Greensboro's jurisdiction. And it's not clear when you drive through there which jurisdiction is which, unless you're very familiar with the maps. So there's going to be a lot of, development that will happen out there that we won't have any input over at all. So I'm trying to make sure that the areas that we do have input over, that we do it well.
Yeah.
So the PUD that we're talking about, just so for my own knowledge here, this isn't the last we heard of it. If we're looking at possible 1,200 other acres, then there's going to be more of those come up.
Yes, I would say yes. And there will be other ones that the PUD tool will be important to have in the toolbox for. And then there will be some that, probably won't develop in that fashion. They will probably come in a more traditional fashion to say, I mean, if all I want to do is apartments, or if all I want to do is townhomes, or if all I want to do is single family only, there are other tools that are already in our toolbox that they can use for that. The Johnson property is a little bit different, and some of the other areas that are around town that could use the plan unit development tool are looking at it as a mixture of those types of uses. And they generally, you want to apply those to larger pieces of property, because it doesn't make any sense to do a 2-acre PUD. Not necessarily, it could, but generally speaking, that's all going to be one type of development. So it's all townhomes, or it's all commercial, or it's all apartments. There's.
Well, and you're right, but of course the PUDs we do have currently are all residential.
Right, you're correct. They are all either townhome, let's see here, I think they're almost all townhome properties right now.
So,
All right.
And that was the reason that they used that tool. I will say the reason that they used that tool prior to the 2009 ordinance adoption is that they were looking to, it was a couple of reasons. I would say one of them could have been environmental in the case of Riverwalk. But ultimately, the biggest thing that they wanted to do was they wanted to reduce the setbacks so that they could get more townhome units in on the same piece of property to make it a viable development, which makes some sense. Anybody else on the listening sessions? All right, Vaughn.
Moving on. So, community survey update. Hopefully you've all taken it.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Hurry up.
I'm just curious, how many of us did take it?
Yes.
So
Yes, for Richmond.
So opened up on April 15th, and we had basically 100 responses in the first 24 hours at least, maybe a few more. We've had 160 responses so far through this afternoon to our really great community survey. We've Matthew got it out on the Facebook page and on the town's website, and it's on the project website as well. Anybody that watches this after it's recorded or watching right now, you can go to the town's Facebook page or the town's website, or go to Envision Jamestown website as well. The address will come up at the end of the presentation here, and you can get to it through a link on any of those places. I think the town also sent out an email. Is that correct, Matthew?
We did. So anybody who has signed up for the town's newsletter, we did send out a very special email that said that we're doing the survey, and it had a link to it there.
So I think lots of people have seen it. We're planning on shutting down responses on May 15th. I think we're going to get lots of responses. It would be great if all of you could encourage your friends and neighbors, church groups, business associates, PTA friends, whomever you associate with or have access to a way to distribute the link, homeowners associations in your neighborhood, and make sure to get it out to as many people as possible. We've been going through some of the responses as they've been coming in, and people have had a lot of really good stuff to say so far. It's very interesting what we've been hearing, and I can't wait for May 15th to show up so we can start crunching the numbers on this like we've been doing with the PUD survey. This will provide us a little bit deeper look into the community as a whole. We've met with you, we've talked to, done a dozen listening sessions, and this gets us deeper into the broader community. So we've heard from 160 people so far. Hundreds more would be great. It's not a big hill to climb. And I think that, if the town and you and the planning board members and council members will help us in this effort in getting the link out there and encouraging folks and interact with to take it, that would be great. We want to hear from as many voices as we can.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How many people are actually putting their names and addresses?
Lots of people are giving us an email address. I think maybe at least half are putting an email address down. Just about everybody is putting down a street name. We asked for people's name of the street living on, maybe more than that. And so we're fairly aware of who is taking the survey.
I was going to say that, Jane, so we would have an idea if you're in town, if you're in the ETJ, if you're from High Point, Greensboro. I think that's good information.
Oh, I think it is too. We just didn't
Yes.
require them to do that. We made it optional. And I was concerned people that don't live in Jamestown would not put anything down.
People are pretty, people respond to that question. They respond honestly from what we've been able to.
Well, good.
It gives, good information, a good perspective about who, we haven't seen a lot of, not to try and get ahead of, it doesn't really appear there's a major, people are part of a, fairly good community in and around Jamestown. And so people tend to have the same kind of hopes and desires for Jamestown as a whole, regardless of, people have different, some little unique concerns that are different. Whether if they're getting town services, they might want, a change in that service, where someone outside of town doesn't get it and they're not really going to have much to say about it.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But like I said, we've gotten a lot of really good responses. We'd love to get, a whole lot more, just so that people have as many opportunities to participate in providing information to us as they can. And, we're not, looking for, this person said this about X, necessarily down to the person, but when we ask them for email addresses, we're, doing that more to help us stay in touch with people as the process goes forward, and, email them about upcoming meetings, other
the community events,
Yeah.
engagement events. Yeah.
We're more, we want to hear the ideas, and we want people to stay in touch. So we will make sure that those people that do want to give us their contact information, we can,
because that's really not a very, That's really not a very strong number for the amount of responses. I mean, with the amount of just Jamestown people itself, I mean, at the population level, it's not a very strong number.
That's why we need to do more ourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
If not,
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. I just,
Well,
I'll
You only
fill
have
out 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
about 5 days, so we need to push awareness of it. Yeah.
The town through its outlets needs to, and it's kind of a difficult time, a little bit more difficult right now than usual in getting in touch with everyone, no matter which way they might have taken it. The number of opportunities that we have right now that we all have to interact with other people, and the ways we interact with them are very different right now. And so really using the tools that remain available to us, and doing some things, maybe like picking up the phone directly, or something along those lines, and encouraging people to take it, or mentioning in the conversations that you're already having, because you might be talking to the same people, but just in different settings. So you might have an opportunity to still mention it. But the town will need to do its part, and you, the steering committee, and others that are involved with the town will need to do their part to make sure that this gets out to as many people as possible. So.
Are there any other outlets that you as a committee would recommend that we do to make sure that we touch more numbers of folks?
Would an article, more information in the newspaper be helpful?
I just set myself a reminder to do a press release, and I'll send out the press release, and I'm sure that Carol will pick up on that in the Jamestown News. I don't know if some of the larger media outlets will pick up on it or not. I would hope that they would.
I think right now they would.
Just from the standpoint of being able to do a television news story that gets in touch with people that are interested in it in this market, as Fox 8, for example. I'm trying to think. We've tossed around the idea of sending out postcards or letters that say, hey, we want you, to everybody who's a water and sewer customer, and we'd like for you to take the survey. Here's how to get to it. I'm open to suggestions.
well, don't we have some local contacts like
Well,
Brad?
Over at Fox 8?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some contacts at Fox 8 that I can certainly reach out to. I will certainly include them in the official press release. Sometimes they'll do the story and not necessarily have to come do an interview. They may get some footage around town or use some footage that they have recently. But hopefully, that would be one outlet, just one outlet. But we've done the special email to everybody that we have an email address for that signed up for our newsletter. We have the Facebook. We've got it on the town's website. It's under town news, I believe, on the drop down. And certainly the project's website, which we haven't necessarily promoted the project website yet, because I think they were still uploading content. And correct me if I'm wrong.
It's live. People can.
Okay.
I'll
make a note to do that.
We could probably get several local news stations if we congregated about 30 people uptown. That would draw them in, and we could drop it in. No, I'm just kidding.
In a more positive way, Rich. Positive.
It could be positive. I'm game.
They might arrest us all, huh?
That's right.
Sorry.
I like the idea. If we could get some press. But we've sent, as long as I'm on here, we sent the information through the Garden Club, which is 35 people, and we've encouraged them to talk to their neighbors. And I probably will send something else out, asking them to at least contact 3 neighbors, and just kind of go through that, ask them if they've done it. And then also we've sent it out through the CCC, which is about 300 of the Cedarwood homes, I believe, are signed up on that. And we'll repeat it. We'll send it out again, and that's about the best I can do, other than our walking downtown with some signs or something.
Yard signs and T-shirts.
We posted on that Nextdoor app. I know there's a lot of people that have signed up for that Nextdoor app.
If
Yeah,
you
I'm on
have
that.
access to that, please put it on Nextdoor. I don't have that one in town, so that'd be great.
I'll take care of that. I'll put that on there. I'm on that daily.
Cool.
On Nextdoor, yeah. Okay.
Well, that's what I wondered, Matt, about the homeowners associations, if we've got contacts for those or.
Most of the ones that I have right now are their management company, and that doesn't really help me. But certainly, you know, I can, if we know one in Riverwalk we could touch base with,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. And Whittington Hall, I think.
Yep, Whittington Hall. I can actually send to ours, at Whittington Hall.
Oh, thank you,
Okay,
Pam.
Kelly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I could do that one.
Thanks, Pam. Great.
And I
Yeah.
can ask the current president at Historic Jamestown Society if they would have to narrow it down to the people that live in the area, because we have members from all over the United States. But that's the one way that we could, you know, if I can get them to do that, I'll have to ask.
Awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's great.
All right.
Um,
Vaughn, would you do me a favor and send us all a link to the project website? I know it's envisionjamestown.com, right?
yeah, we can. It'll be the last slide on here, so you can.
Okay, that'd be, sorry.
Any other questions on the survey? All right. Well, our next meeting with you will feature the results of that survey as one of the main points of conversation. All right, moving along. So, community engagement and the time of not being able to engage very well. So we had an initial plan, our community public engagement plan for 3 major workshops towards the beginning of the process here. And the first one was supposed to be happening in May. It was going to be called Envision Jamestown. We had a pretty decent plan laid out for that. But it's been waylaid a little bit because of some state mandates and, you know, I would imagine individual concerns that people would have about, even in the absence of a state mandate, gathering in large groups for long periods of time. And so we had a couple other meetings or, you know, workshops scheduled, you know, tentatively after that as well. But events have altered our schedule and kind of the available concepts that we have for engaging with the community. And we have a timeline that we kind of, you know, we're trying to stick to with this project, and we have some other things like that. And so we've talked to Matthew a few times about, you know, how do we move forward? And this meeting with you today is one of the ways we, you know, try to move forward as much as we can with the project and not lose a lot of time or energy to events that are unfortunately outside of our control. And through our own internal discussions and discussions with Matthew, we've figured out, I think, a way that we might be able to proceed with at least the initial round of direct community engagement. And so what we would do for that is essentially the same things that we would have done with everybody gathered in the Civic Center in Jamestown there at Town Hall. But we would have to, of course, move most of this online. What we had, you know, just as a refresher, I think we'd probably talked about it a little bit, was for our first meeting to be looking at the community broadly and getting direct input from attendees at that first meeting. We would have started out with a, you know, welcome and introduction by the mayor, most likely, and moved on to some vignettes that we would have invited some people from the community to do a recorded 3 to 5 minute presentation about their, you know, their experience in Jamestown, growing up here, living here, starting a business here, whatever perspective, we identified some people that we were going to be asking or inviting to do that. That's kind of been thrown off a little bit too in terms of timing. We hope to still include that because I think it's important that people get to hear from their neighbors directly about their experience in the community. Then we would have been presenting to the assembled group, survey results and our background research that we would have presented to you immediately before then, just to kind of give people some perspectives about what the other members of their group thought and ideas they had in case something surprised someone. As well as the background research, we've been working on doing demographics, population, housing, education, income, environmental issues, land use, transportation, education, the whole gamut of issues that have shaped Jamestown and will shape it in the future. So we would have been presenting some highlights on that. Moving forward, we can transition those things online fairly easily as presentations will be available on our website. The presentation of the survey results and background research could be done either as a live event, pre-recorded, mixture of both. Either way, something just like this meeting would be then available on the project website for anybody that wanted to come review those. And in the absence of us being able to really gather together in large numbers and have roundtable discussions at a table in person, we thought that we might do the same thing, take a 2-week period where we would set aside our time and we, Benchmark, would directly facilitate small group discussions in a settings. This one that we're in right now, we'd probably limit it to 4 or 5 participants other than us, what we would expect maybe to have around a roundtable. And we would be engaging them with a series of scenario-based questions, discussion questions about their thoughts about Jamestown as a community, their concerns, and not recording those necessarily, but having that as an opportunity for us to get input directly. Because our thoughts had been to have a series of maybe 3 or 4 questions to pose to the group at this first big public meeting. That each group would then take 10 or 15 minutes to discuss amongst themselves, and then at the end of the evening, we would have had everybody come back together to report out their findings. And this way, we would be actually able to facilitate and engage directly with people instead of in that larger setting, leaving it to groups to self-facilitate. And we would also be able to do the recordation of that, the note taking ourselves as well, so that we could then present back maybe a more thorough report than we might get from the individuals just taking a couple minutes at the end of the evening to report what their discussions consisted of. And so we wanted to bring this up to you as a possible alternative, as a way to move forward with that aspect of the project, because really in our discussions, we're at a bit of a loss as to a scenario in which any time in the really foreseeable future, feeling that people would be, even if allowed, comfortable being in that type of setting, which is kind of the setting we were envisioning for each of those meetings in one way, shape, or form. But just certainly the ability to have invite the community at large into a space and have them sit there for an hour and a half, 2 hours as we interact with each other doesn't seem feasible in a time frame that I think would allow us to move forward with the project under the previously contemplated schedule. We're already off schedule a little bit by not being able to meet in March, but just wanted to run that by all of you.
Well, I was going to say, of course, the time schedule because of what's happened. So we're not going to be able to stick to that schedule.
Yeah.
I think you need to think about this a little more. I know you're trying to be creative and trying to find a way to move on in these hard times and not just to put things on the shelf. But the big thing that we stressed we selected y'all was community involvement, participation. we were disappointed what happened the first go round and did not get participation from the community. And that's what we were striving to get. And of course, here we are where we together. So I get what you're trying to do. That's awesome. But I could not sit here right now and tell you what you have proposed, and what I'm reading here is the thing to do.
Okay. So what we'll need from the steering committee then.
That's fine. Hey, other people, please chime in.
Is either, agreement or disagreement or alternatives, because May is going to turn into June, July, and July to December, potentially very quickly. And I like I said, I don't personally see scenarios emerging in the short term being months, where people will feel comfortable gathering together in large numbers. I love big meetings. I would love to get everybody together tomorrow.
I know.
I just have doubts about whether that's going to be feasible. But
Well,
I have a
if we,
question. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a question. Is it possible to meet in something like a park, since that it's kind of widely known that the sunlight does kill germs? And even like something like Wren Miller, maybe this is way out of the ballpark, but Wren Miller Park, where someone would have a microphone and we could sit far apart. I mean, that might be a community event, and
I think
would that be some kind of option to having a presentation?
Yeah. So I don't
to meet in the park.
I want to make sure that as many people can participate as possible in whatever we do. And I think that the likelihood of the state not having a prohibition on large gatherings, no matter how far we stay away from each other, is unlikely to end. I could see that being in place for a very long time. So
I mean, when is your deadline? Your survey has to be in by May is when you're going
May
to
15th.
result from the survey. May 15th. So you'll be given your results from the survey. Well, things have changed so quickly with this virus and the regulations, and they can, we don't know though. That's the thing is
we don't know, and we can wait. We can say we'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then we can do a do-over and do it again.
Yeah, maybe.
Our not main concern, but we think that we've already lost some momentum by being disrupted by this. I don't know if I think we can maybe hope to regain some of it that we had. It's going to be tough no matter what, anytime in the immediate future to really, get the full process that we want to be having going on. That we were really looking forward to the summer being able to hit, May, June, July, August with these, big meetings and have everybody come out.
Well, guys, why don't we
think
start with 5-minute vignettes, and then if everything progresses in the nation faster than we think it's been going, then maybe in late June, early July, we can have some limited meetings of 20 or 30 people in the park designated.
Good idea.
We could actually do both, so we'd be moving on both fronts, not give up one for the other.
And I'm a little more optimistic than that. I think we might miss May, but I feel very confident that June. 30th, but I think we ought to look at June. We plan, because people are going to be starving to get out at that point also. And we want to take advantage of them at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were looking to June to do this, just because of being kind of a month delayed from not being able to meet with you last month. But, you know, we certainly have some time right now to, that we can build into wait. I think that, you know, we would certainly want to make sure that we had enough time prior to it to be able to advertise adequately. And then we would need to, you know, if it was going to be a multi-day or multi-time type of event, then we would need to make sure that we had our schedule set. We're, you know, just us, we're stretching a lot of stuff out in terms of doing a lot more online, a lot more frequent online types of meetings right now that are, you know, you'd think that doing this would, you know, be less work for us, but it's actually not. It's actually turned out to be more work, which is fine because we want to make sure that we are, you know, engaging with all of our clients, especially where we're trying to move a process like this forward with the community, that, you know, as much as we can. So if the consensus is we want to hold off a little bit before we make a decision like that, and that's fine. If you want us to try it out or have different types of opportunities for people, that's fine too. I think we can probably approach it from a multi-pronged standpoint where people might have, you know, if it is possible to gather in an open door type or an open air type setting, we could do that, along with maybe offering people the opportunity that don't feel comfortable doing that, the opportunity to meet us online, where we'd be able to facilitate the same type of engagement or similar type of engagement with them in a venue where they don't have to be around other people if they have health concerns or other concerns in general.
Like I said, I understand and I feel for you trying to keep this thing alive and going. It's been such a new thing for everyone to do. But I would love for us to, and okay, if you do a June workshop online, that's great. But I would love, like others who spoke there, there's Red Ed Stafford, to also offer in hopes of maybe July having some type of physical get together outside, however, and not just totally say we're not going to do.
No. Our intent is not to not have, you know, at some point during this process, you know, God willing, there will be, you know, people in a big room. That's, you know, we need that to happen again. I hope that can happen before we conclude or need to conclude, which is, you know, still some time off. I mean, it's not we're not looking out, you know, we're not finishing up, you know, anytime soon, but it's just
like we said, that timeline is skewed now.
It is
I can't see it necessarily happening when we said it originally was going to happen.
Yeah, it is skewed a bit from what we had originally envisioned.
Which is out of everyone's control, you know, no one's fault.
Sure. Yeah. We just want to make sure that, you know, you as a committee get to stay engaged, and so we need stuff to do, and we will do as much as we can until we can gather everyone back. Do as much as we can. So that's just our idea. We will, I guess, coordinate with Matthew a little bit more maybe on that over the next couple of weeks to see where things are headed as events unfold in our communities and across the state, to see what our local leaders are thinking and see what the governor's thinking about how we were going to proceed. But just so we are thinking about it, and all options really are on the table, and we need to get that input and advice from you about how to move forward. So we'll do that for the time being. Just kind of hold off on making any firm plans right now.
We should set up some tables at Lowe's and Home Depot and True Value. That's where none of us, anybody can go.
It's maybe not a bad idea.
There is a commercial out for some roofing place or something that's setting up a table. So, and they have their computer at one end and the people at the other, and so they can still do home quotes and things.
Yeah.
Wow.
Skywalker Roofing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we'll circle back around to that with Matthew over the next couple of weeks. We might engage with you if things are emerging, maybe before our next official big meeting. We might want to poll you all by email or something like that, or have some small. All right. Next slide. So steering committee meetings. So I guess the plan would be to hold these meetings online for the foreseeable future until such time as we can get back together. Since we're a smaller group, that opportunity may come about sooner than for potentially larger groups. There still might be, of course, some of you who, for one reason or another, might not be feasible for you to attend, or might not want to attend out of an abundance of caution, and we certainly wouldn't fault anyone for that. And so we would make sure that even if we were meeting in person again in a larger room where we could stay more separate from each other, that we would provide opportunities for everyone to participate in that as well. As I mentioned previously, we will have our next committee meeting, I think similar to this, in later May, after the conclusion of the survey. So we have those results done. I think Bridget's, fairly well wrapped up, getting close to wrapping up with the background research. Matthew's been getting a lot of data for us.
I owe you some stuff, sorry.
And some other stuff we're still, we've sent Matthew some long lists of things to review for us that we've been putting together. So all got a lot of good work to do. And so we'll probably send that out before the next meeting so you can thumb through it before we present it. So again, those topics for the next meeting will be survey results, background research, the adopted plan analysis, and some more preparation for what we decide to do between now and then, or bring a decision for you to make about public meetings so we can begin preparing for those in whichever way we choose to move forward. So that is those are our topics for the next steering committee meeting, tentatively scheduled. I guess we can, the method that Matthew used to poll you to set up this meeting date, I guess we can do the same thing for the next one as people's plans for that part of the month come about. You might even be able to go to the beach by then, who knows?
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Would be nice.
It was.
Any other questions about the next steering committee meeting?
I guess you said you'll get those dates out to us as soon as you know when they.
We'll work with Matthew to find some dates that will be available
Later in May.
Later in May, and so probably you'll probably get an email from him or something towards the set that up.
All right. Well, I appreciate y'all taking the time and all your and Matt too, your innovative work on making this happen. This is actually my third or fourth Zoom, which I have never done in my life. So who says you can't teach an old dog new trick?
You're doing great. So I guess as a final point, I'll put that's the website address right there if anybody wants to write it down. We thought we'd have a little bit more content by now, but because we're going a little bit slower than we thought we would, it's not as chock full of exciting things yet as we hoped for it to be. But as time moves on, there will be more information out there. So just as a general point back to the group, were there, did anybody have any trouble using this, getting on, anything else we need to know about? Things I know Sherry had some issues with audio, but besides that, anything that we can technologically fix to make it an easier task for the meeting, in case we're meeting like this for a while? Or just...
I had some of the audio and some of it froze up a little bit here or there, but it all came out, fairly quickly. So it wasn't.
A couple people's video freeze up just from observing the gallery, but it wasn't Was our audio on this end coming through fine?
Yes.
Well, number two, for me, it sort of froze up, but even the audio, but long enough that you couldn't understand what was happening.
Okay.
And I'm still on AOL dial-up, so it's hard for me, but I got
That's why he was having some trouble.
That's pretty good if it's doing that though. So.
Yeah, you are.
I have no idea.
If you have an iPhone, you can download a Zoom app and actually do the call from the iPhone.
That's it. I'm on my iPhone as we speak.
Yep.
Looking good. Coming through pretty clear.
Appreciate it, Vaughn.
Yeah. Anything else for Matthew? You have anything else you'd like?
No, I was just gonna say, I do have a question for you. If you'll just call me on my cell phone when we get done here. I got a quick question for you. It's about artwork so I can promote some of this stuff. So.
All right. Well, who's got the gavel?
Got it. I can kick us all out, but y'all have a great evening.
Bye.
We'll conclude it now.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.